it's always fun when you get the early night ones, like the first REM
Yeah.
periods or even some of those. And it is kind of interesting to think like I would be willing to bet that possibly slipped in and out of like maybe N2 or N1 and during that one because it kind of felt like it might have like faded in and out at a couple of moments, but I'm not sure if that was actually me changing out of sleep stages or if it was just something in related to how I was expecting things to happen. But because I have a pretty deep expectation that that particular dream ended in a false awakening because then I have another dream that basically runs like a false awakening. It's basically like another thing, and it might have all been one whole dream because it was, at least according to my watch, it was a 23-minute REM period, and I guarantee you that that lucid that I had wasn't all 23 minutes of it. So I'm pretty sure that the dream afterwards was basically a false awakening. So if it's saying I didn't
Mm.
actually wake up during that time, then I'm pretty sure that that was probably a false awakening. It's kind of cool to consider all this stuff.
Yeah, that is cool. It does get confusing sometimes because I remember when I was doing this study in the lab at Northwestern, I couldn't tell at one point if I was lucid or if I was just waking up. Welcome back to the Dream World podcast and also a collaboration podcast with Skyfall Blind Dreamer, who is another content creator and lucid dream enthusiast, and also my good friend. So, Skyfall and I met just online in the lucid dreaming community. I think specifically maybe on Reddit or honestly, I don't know, YouTube, all the above. And Skyfall is really cool because he's also a lucid dreamer and he has been blind since a young age. So I'll let you take it away, tell your story. What are your dreams like? What's your experience with lucid dreaming, and how does your like waking world and dream world kind of correlate?
Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night to anybody who happens to be watching this. As Amina just said, I'm Skyfall Blind Dreamer. I've been lucid dreaming since October of 2020, which is the worst year of my life, thanks to COVID. And I've been blind. I've had a genetic condition that I've had since birth, and I had reduced sight from a very young age, basically since birth, and then reduced to the point over time where I just have light perception. So I've been living visually impaired my entire life, and it does definitely have an impact on my dreams in terms of just that they're more auditory and tactile based. Visuals don't really matter. In fact, I don't often notice them much at all. I mean, just like when I'm awake, I can visualize things and imagine things because I had some sight when I was younger, and I can see better in dreams than when I'm awake, but it's not really important. Like, it doesn't matter at all to me in terms of the actual content that I'm experiencing. It doesn't really play much of a role in it. And so it's interesting because I literally see the world in a completely different way than the average person.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's funny because people are always like, oh, but like, how do blind people dream? And I'm like, the same way they experience regular waking life, just through sensations and memories and feelings. So I imagine your dreams are probably still very vivid. And you said you can visualize, which I think is cool. When you say visualize, do you mean like, what is that process like for you? Is it more like tactile than visual?
So basically, it's really weird. It's interesting. It's like I can repurpose my visual cortex for accessing other sensory data. So like I can quote unquote visualize like a very vague image of what something might look like. But then while I do that, I then bring up the tactile, and I can bring up auditory without doing this at all. I can bring up auditory on command without anything because that's my strongest. But for tactiles, I can sort of like imagine like the outline of something that I've experienced before, and then immediately call up tactile sensations. I'm doing it right now. I'm imagining, for example, the hotel I stayed in 2022 when I went to the ISD conference, the seats on the average commercial airliner. I can imagine sitting on the United Airlines flight I took up to DC in March, and immediately as I imagine sitting there, I can imagine the texture of the underside of the in-flight entertainment screen where the headphone jack was located. And so like I can immediately just pull these things up by visualizing them. So I can visualize sort of like a very vague outline of it, and then associated with that is memories related to an experience, and of course tactile and other sensory data as well. So that's sort of how my mind works. I actively visualize a lot, and I didn't even pay attention or notice it, but I just always do it when I walk around. And it wasn't something I really started tracking consciously until like 2022.
But yeah, that's super cool. I've always been so interested in, how your mind works and how such good memory you have and all that. So what were your first lucid dreams like? Like how was your dream recall and how did you begin to realize like, oh, this is a dream?
Well, you see, I didn't know what lucid dreaming was. I think the first one I can remember, I was standing in some, I was in some spot, and I ended up going down a little hallway, and I went through a door, and I was on the subway platform in New York City, and I realized, oh, I'm a dream. Well, I'm in a dream or something along that line, and I just was able to make a subway train appear out of thin air, as you do, and I took it up from Herald Square to Rockefeller Center, and then I kind of like lost awareness, but I knew I was in a dream, and it was I think I only did that like twice. The other time I really remember doing this is before I even knew what it was. I was just sitting in a bed, but it wasn't really my room. I walked over to where there was a computer, and I did like the dumbest thing. I say the dumbest thing, but it's something that a lot of beginners do because they don't really think of much else to do in the moment because it's just like, hey, I'm dreaming. Can I wake myself up? And it's something a lot
Yep.
of people think of. And so I did the most nerdy thing a nerd could ever do, and I ran wakeup.exe on the run dialog on the computer and woke up that way. That's the thing. Technology for me almost always works as it's supposed to. Always.
Really? That's interesting. So you actually, what is that, like a joke, or you actually typed it and wake up and
I
then
literally did. Got on the desktop on the computer, Windows M, desktop, Windows R, popped up the run dialog, typed wakeup.exe, pressed enter.
that's
Like
cool. That's so
literally
funny and it
actually did
worked.
that. Yes, because I expected it to. Obviously,
Yeah,
I
exactly. Yep,
yep.
belief plays a big role. And a lot
Mhm.
of people will say like, "Oh, my phone never works in my dream." And for me it's 50-50. Sometimes it glitches and sometimes my phone works perfectly in a dream, which is weird.
I think one of the reasons technology works as well as it does for me in a lot of dreams is because I have to memorize how things work in order to use them effectively. And so, like, I'm playing a Star Trek game, and it's text based, and I know the code in and out because of just how it works. Like, I've done messed around with all the systems on there. I memorized all the commands, all the responses you get, how it works. I've basically watched it or heard it happen so many times. And so if I dream about playing that game, the game mechanics are nearly perfect. There's an occasional like little glitch in the machine in a sense, but the mechanics are nearly perfect. The same with browsing a computer or using a computer or using my phone because I've just memorized how it works. And that plays a big role in a lot of consistency in terms of technology.
Oh, interesting. So what about other aspects of your waking life? Do you feel like your dreams are pretty consistent with your experiences, or do you have like bizarre, weird, dreamy
Oh, I've got a
situations?
lot of bizarre, weird, dreamy situations. Like, for example, just last week, you walk into an elevator and then all the braille labels on the buttons just keep changing. That happens to me every so often in dreams. Practiced Japanese last night. Wasn't lucid in this, but I was sitting on a train. I think it was supposed to be a Shinkansen, and I was practicing Japanese with somebody. Just a little bit that I've been trying to learn. And I've had a whole bunch of random stuff happen in dreams. Everything from like outer space, cool sci-fi, to just being in places I've never been, to fantasy, all sorts of like I've had all sorts of weird dreams that are really fun in that sense. But I can get a lot of things like if I'm dreaming about something that is from waking life, like my house, for example, the layout of my house almost never changes. In fact, it only changes a couple, like in some specific ways sometimes, but it's very consistent. And in false awakenings, when I'm lucid, it's pretty consistent. One of the issues I had in the beginning was actually trying to change it because I had issues expecting things to be different. And so I had to come up with my own way of doing that. But using my iPhone is pretty consistent for the most part, or using my laptop. I was, for example, trying to book an accommodation on an Amtrak train on my phone in a dream last night. And so the weird glitch thing happened in terms of it was changing the train number because I didn't have that memorized, or the app I was using, but the actual mechanics of how my phone worked with voiceover, that was consistent the entire time.
That's interesting. So it's kind of like the things that are solidified in your brain that you know will work well. It's like your confidence in those things plays a big role in its ability to work well in your dream.
It's both the confidence and the fact that I have the strong association for how it'll work because I've been using this specific technology for like 12 years, and memorizing how it works and then having that just be ingrained to an instinctual level is where I have this instinctual expectation of this is how it's supposed to work. And if it doesn't, I've got a problem. And then that just translates into my dream is
Yeah.
I know how this thing works. I pick it up. It does exactly what I tell it to do. And when it breaks, I usually know what's going wrong or what the issue is and how to get around it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, interesting. So what are your triggers for lucidity, and like when you do get lucid, like what kinds of things do you like to do?
They can be the most random things. Sometimes I'll just know. It'll be like a little click. I'll be walking down a hallway. Like 2 nights ago, I had done a mob practice and I was messing around with something and I just started walking down a hallway. And I was like, hang on, I'm dreaming. And then I was like, you know what? I haven't flown in a while, so let's try to do that. And then I tried to get a face to earth position and landed on the floor. And I was like, you know what? My old standby, jumped through the ceiling. And then I did that. And then I started flying around and I got horizontal and did barrel rolls and a couple loops. And I was like, I hadn't done reverse skydiving in a long time. Actually flew up and intercepted a Cessna and had the longest of these kind of like flying dreams I think I've ever had. I got into the plane and it was really fun because there was a pilot in there and she acted just like you would expect anyone to react if you boarded their airplane. They were flying at several thousand feet. You just climbed in through the door. I was just like, am I dead? And I was like, nah, this is just my lucid dream. Everything's okay.
That's funny.
And so I had a lot of fun with that. That was the most fun dream I've had in the past week, was that one from a couple days ago. So yeah, they can be bizarre. Sometimes it'll be clearly notice something. Hey, I noticed this weird thing. Hey, this doesn't make any sense. I'm dreaming. Or it'll just be something will just click. Like it was more in the old days of me noticing something specific going, hey, that's not right. And then realizing it was a dream. And then as I continued practicing, a lot of times it would just click. Hey, this is a dream. It would just click. I wouldn't necessarily notice the specific thing. Like, for example, the hallway I was walking in when I got lucid, that wasn't a place I've ever been before. I don't even know what that place was exactly supposed to be or where I was going or what I was supposed to be doing there. And I can find dream signs looking back on that, like, what exactly is this place? How did I get there and all that? But I just realized, I just knew in the moment, hey, I'm dreaming, and just continued to do the things I wanted to do, which turned into something pretty fun.
Yeah, I think it's cool how after a while, when you get used to being lucid, I have that too, where I just kind of know sometimes, like I don't need anything to specifically trigger me to become lucid. I'm just like, I recognize the feeling of being in a dream. And I think the more lucid dreams you have, like the more get used to that. So I think that's cool too. I'm also curious, like Skyfall, where do you stand in terms of like understanding the science and the spirituality of dreams? Like, do you think lucid dreams and dreams in general is something that arises internally from within us, or do you think there's an element of something beyond us that we access?
I am take the more scientific approach, more logic based, more like everything has an explanation. If you search hard enough, you'll find it. In terms of, I think there's a way
Yeah.
you can explain how all these things in dreams work. You can find ways to understand them. And I'm not too big into like the spiritual side of things. I prefer more like I like to rationalize how everything works, and I like to understand it and have a logical development. That's how I approach lucid dreaming. I can understand that something is out of place and unusual. I can understand that, in fact, in a dream. And I approach dream control the same way. My perception of what I'm experiencing is ultimately what dictates what I experience. And by changing my perception, I change the experience. I can oftentimes in my dreams sort of trace why I was dreaming about a specific thing, including some really bizarre examples. Like the example that came up in the flying dream, one example of that is the Cessna 172. Why did I come across a Cessna 172, or it was supposed to be? Well, I've actually flown in those planes multiple times before, and I thought it would be really fun to actually fly one of them. And so ended up in one. I've been in those plenty of times. And it was a kind of small plane that I'd be like, yeah, that'd be kind of fun to get into. And, why the pilot said she was flying out of a specific airport. Well, that's my home airport that I use. And so it's pretty obvious where that one came from. And so I can kind of trace these things to where I can pick out where like a certain element might be, or why that might be in that spot and stuff like that. So I kind of take the logical approach. I think that our dreams are reflections of our own minds, and maybe we don't understand exactly everything that goes into that yet, but I think we can. I think that science will reveal to us a pretty good understanding of things. And you know what? We'll just get more questions with deeper things as they go on, because that's typically how scientific discovery works. But I think we will understand a lot more in the future about how dreams and dreaming work. And we'll be able to have, with a whole host of new questions, we'll also be able to then explain a lot of things that we didn't know.
Yeah, true. I think it's just the beginning, really. And dreams are cool. I think obviously, we know that we dream about the things in our daily life, processing memories, storing things in our brain, coming up with creative solutions, like about the things that we're already thinking of and experiencing. And even if we don't realize it, maybe, things that we hear in passing or see in our peripherals, or we don't even realize that we pick up on just walking down the street because we're not conscious of everything. Maybe some people more than others, but I think that can contribute to our dream content as well. So maybe some people don't realize truly how much we're taking in all the time. So I know you like to make content online and talk about lucid dreaming and that kind of stuff. Is that kind of like what you're into, like teaching people about lucid dreaming, or kind of like what's your goal within the community?
One of my goals in the community are really, one, to teach people about lucid dreaming. I really do enjoy going out there and just talking to random strangers, anybody, about lucid dreaming. I'll ask random people I meet on the street. I'll ask somebody I'm sitting next to on a plane. I'll ask somebody I run into at an amusement park or at a restaurant, like if I'm sitting near, like depending on the situation, I'll ask just a lot of people, hey, have you ever heard of it? Or if anyone's interested, I'll tell them about it. And I'm very much like to help people whenever I can. And so in a situation where I have taken time to try to learn things, I like to be able to pass those on to others. And so being out there to be able to teach other people about lucid dreaming has been something I really enjoyed doing. I feel like I can contribute to the progress of other people and contribute to the community in that way. I'm also really interested in the ongoing discovery of knowledge related to lucid dreaming and researching it and figuring out how things work. I think it's really cool. It's the kind of thing I think would be really fun to be involved with. And so that's kind of where my personal interest is in terms of lucid dreaming and the community as a whole.
I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I love keeping up with the research and getting involved when possible, but I do think it's cool to just normalize talking about dreams. I need to work on my social anxiety and get like you and just spark up a conversation with strangers about their dreams. I've actually been wanting to like make a sign and just go walk through the public park, being like, have you ever had a lucid dream? And like making YouTube videos of like random strangers answering these questions. Or like, do you think dreams have meaning? Which are two questions that I would love to just ask people. Like, what's your take on dreams? And have you ever been lucid? And then that just kind of gets people going. Like, if it's like, oh, I had this weird dream once and I never get to talk about it. Or like, oh, I had a lucid dream and I didn't know that there was all these possibilities. Like, people just don't know that, like, hey, it's okay to talk about this stuff. So I think it's good to normalize that.
You know what? You could make like a little series of that as heard on the street or as seen on the street and do like a little dream questionnaire series and then just do it in the various cities you go to and visit and make like a little series of, hey, I visited this city. Let's go out and find a public area and see what do people think or know about lucid dreaming. And you could take it different ways. You could take it like do you think your dreams have meaning? Do it that way. Or have you ever had a lucid dream? Or you could also just gauge the general level of awareness of, have you ever heard of lucid dreaming? Or what do you think it is if you have? The last person I asked that question to gave me the default inaccurate response of thinking that it's about controlling your dreams. Yeah, it's the person who was helping me on graduation, had a marshal helping me make sure I got where I needed to go during graduation. And as graduation ceremonies go, I just graduated college last weekend. There is about 15 minutes where you're actually doing stuff and about 2 hours where you're either sitting and waiting or standing and waiting. And so this is during the hour and 45 minutes of us standing and waiting. And I just ended up talking to her about lucid dreaming, and she gave me the answer that most people give me. And she said it's about controlling your dreams. And it's the kind of thing that it's a lot of people don't really know what it is. And when you find someone who actually knows what lucid dreaming is, that's kind of a rarity. And it's really interesting when you do find someone who actually knows what it is.
Yeah, I get so excited when somebody's like a seasoned lucid dreamer. It's fun. But I also, like you said, I think it's a great idea to just get in the community, because coming up with those misconceptions and things, it's a great opportunity to teach people about what lucidity really is. And that's a very common one that I hear a lot, is people thinking it's controlling your dreams. And it's interesting because I was just reading like a book or an article the other day about how when they first started defining these terms and stuff, there were some researchers or practitioners that thought that the criteria should be more than just awareness, because it's such a spectrum, which I think I'm kind of going with the idea that the awareness is the baseline criteria for lucidity. And we've had streams where we've talked about this before, so I know you kind of know where this is going. Yeah, and then it's like, then you have the lucidity where you're fully aware, where your body is sleeping and you're aware of what you have to do the next day and what you're going to eat for breakfast, and you're fully aware of your waking life while in this lucid dream. And then there's dreams where you know that it's a dream, but you can't really control anything and you're not really fully conscious of yourself. And then there's all these different levels of lucidity. So like, I don't know, do you think that there should be kind of a hard criteria for it, or do you think we should let it be loose with kind of just like the baseline of awareness?
You see, I've always described lucid dreaming, and you probably know where this is going too, because we've had these conversations before.
Yeah.
But I describe it as a dimmer switch. There is a point where it's off, there's a point where it's on, but within the point where it's on, it can be really bright, it can be really dim, it can be anywhere in the middle. There's all sorts. But one thing I do is I do divorce the awareness aspect and knowing and being aware that you're dreaming, being conscious, and like the amount of awareness that you can have in a dream with the control aspect, because I see those as being separate skills. One of those is being based on your state perception, like being able to perceive the state that you're in and accurately determine what you are experiencing in a given moment. Am I dreaming? Am I awake? And then how much of that access to waking memory do you have? Okay, I know I'm dreaming and I know I've got this thing going on, or I know I'm dreaming and I know I have these specific goals that I want to accomplish, which is kind of where I was a couple nights ago. I wasn't necessarily thinking about my waking life, but I knew, hey, I had this thing that I've really enjoyed doing before. That's been like my first ever dream goal. It's like I've only done this a couple times. This is a great opportunity. Why not do it again? That kind of thing. Or you have these really, lower awareness. So like, I realize I'm in a dream, don't really do anything with it, don't really remember to do much with it. Or the really super high ones is like, it's a dream, you're realizing that you got stuff going on, that you have to wake up, you remember very specific things that you decided you wanted to do the night before, that kind of stuff. And then control is controlling how you perceive the environment, controlling how you perceive the experience that you're having. And I see that in a separate way, because you can have really low awareness lucid dreams with good dream control, really high awareness lucid dreams with good dream control, and you can have both the opposite way as well. And I kind of see those as being separate things, because you're engaging with kind of separate aspects, separate skills in a way. One, you're trying to train how you believe and how you expect things to happen and how you perceive the environment that you're in. And the other is you're training yourself to be able to understand what sort of experience you're having. So I kind of see those separately.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's good to just kind of not be too rigid with it and to have different types of dreams and different classifications for yourself. Criteria can be helpful, but sometimes it can also be limiting, because every dream can look so different and everybody is different as well. So, yeah, I try not to stress about labeling too much.
I can totally see that. And of course, there's the whole aspect of like pre-lucid, but not quite lucid. And then also the other thing that a lot of people get into debates over is, can you have dream control without being lucid? And I would say unequivocally, yes. Absolutely,
Yeah.
you can control the environment that you're in. You can control the situation with it without knowing that it's a dream. You can have control over it. Probably the most common example I cite of me not being lucid and exercising a pretty decent degree of dream control is the example where I literally had a scene in a dream that didn't go the way I wanted it to. I rewound time, repeated it, and made it go the way I wanted it to, without knowing that I was dreaming.
Yeah, which is funny because that is
Yes.
such a dream sign right there.
Yes.
Like, that could never happen. But that has happened to me too, where I'm just like doing these superpowers. And I feel like it's kind of a pre-lucid thing for me sometimes, because I'm making lucid decisions, but I think it's waking life and I just want the dream to go my way. Or maybe I'm flying or I change the scene, but it's not out of lucidity. It's more so out of confidence or stress, even, where I'm just like, no, I want the dream to go this way, even though I don't know that it's a dream, which is kind of hard to explain. But some people call it power dream.
I just want this thing to happen a certain way. Like, I'm
Yeah.
escaping from a starship. Like, I had a mixed Star Wars, Star Trek kind of dream last night, where it was like a Star Trek inspired ship with a dark side Star Wars cult on it that was like chasing me, and I had supposedly started, my life on that ship or whatever. And then I was like, okay, I want to escape from these guys, and so I just disapparated. So I just, apparated somewhere else, and like, okay, mission done, carry on.
Why can't we have this control in waking
Yeah.
life?
You haven't quite mastered the little things like teleportation yet.
Yeah, we'll see. Interesting. Yeah. So, speaking of waking life, what is your general awareness like in waking life? Like, do you feel like it correlates with your dream awareness?
I'd say probably it definitely can and does vary depending on the situation, depending on what I'm doing. There's sometimes where I'll be actively focused or hyper aware about specific things, or actively just trying to pay attention and observe everything that I'm experiencing or doing or noticing and all that kind of stuff. There are definitely sometimes where I'm it's a little bit more internal, or I'm doing other things. Kind of depends. Like right now, I'm listening to myself talk, and I can hear a TV through the wall behind me. Kind of feel the sensations of my chair and the table my arm is laying on and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it really can vary. Sometimes I'm more aware of what I'm experiencing than other times, and then I sometimes I'll just stop and think about what I'm doing. It can honestly vary from day to day. These last few weeks have been pretty stressful with the last paper, my capstone paper, trying to get that finished and finally getting done with university and all that. So now that that's kind of over, I've been a bit more free to think about other things, and yeah, it's been kind of nice. And so it can honestly vary. I'd say possibly it really depends. Some of my dreams are just like really busy. They got a lot going on. Actually, a lot of my dreams can be pretty busy and have a lot going on. And sometimes it's easy to get distracted, just like in waking life, with things that are going like that in dreams. And so basically, sometimes in my dreams, when I've gotten lucid, I found that in like a lot of the lucid dreams that I've had, they're not all of them, but like in some of them, I can clearly tell that there's not a whole lot going on in some of the dreams that I've actually got lucid. Like that hallway from a couple days ago, I was just walking along. There might have been a couple other people in it. I wasn't talking to anybody. there wasn't really anything going on. And I realized that I was in a dream. I've also I did experiments on myself a couple of years ago now. Oh my gosh, I need to go back and dig up what exact dates because I logged the dates and the exact times I did these. But I was using my phone to try like a very untargeted form of our audio incorporation using SiriusXM, and I actually had a little bit of fun doing it. And I could tell that some nights when I wouldn't really notice it versus some nights that I would, the times where I wasn't noticing it was like I was in a crowd of people or I was talking to someone, or I was doing other things. So there was just other stuff going on. And the times I noticed it where I'd be like, oh, I'm having a false awakening. There's nothing else in this room. And thing kind of like that. You know what I mean? And so I think it kind of
Yeah.
varies. I think that does have a bit of an impact.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard for most people as well. But I have noticed, once people get into a lucid dreaming practice, they naturally start to just be more mindful and aware throughout the day because it's
Absolutely.
something you kind of have to start to think about. So, you mentioned something earlier that made me want to ask you, have you experimented with like any dream technology, wristbands, headbands? I know you said you were tracking your sleep recently. What's that experience been like?
So, am I experimenting with any wearable technology for dreaming? If you had asked me this before last Thursday, I would have said no. Since you're asking me after last Thursday, I'll say yes. I'm currently experimenting with Apple Watch and sleep tracking, but I'm really looking forward to more properly testing out the Dream Director app's ability to. By the way, shout out to the makers of Dream Director because their app is pretty cool. Now that I finally got a phone and Apple Watch that can support it, I've only come across really one accessibility issue with it so far, and that was related to like just one kind of looping thing where it was looping around instead of just ending where it was supposed to. But you have to train it for 8 days, and I'm literally like in the middle of that training period before I can actually try to experiment with it and see if their REM detection is pretty solid. So I'll be interested. Dr. Ken Leslie is the one responsible for that. So shout out to Dr. Ken Leslie. I don't know if you watch Amina's podcast or not, but just in case you happen to, this is the blind person you talk to. Let's see, when did you send this email?
I would be honored if they did listen. Maybe I'll reach out. I think it's cool to hear about new apps and stuff
Way
that
back
do.
last year. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, if
Yep.
you're listening, hey. So interesting. How does it track REM? I know that a lot of watches use like your heart rate and stuff. Do you know if there's another way
So
that
I'm
it?
not sure exactly how it does it, but I do know that the Apple Watch does have a lot of built-in sensors. For example, they have high G accelerometers, high dynamic range gyroscope. They have different optical and electrical heart rate sensors, I believe, as well as thermometers. They can track a bunch of different things. I'm not sure exactly how their sleep algorithm works. I haven't actually dug into all of that specifically, but I know that just like with the Fitbit stuff, they can monitor quite a lot of stuff. Apple doesn't distinguish between N1 and N2 light sleep. It just calls it core sleep, and it has all that in one category. But it does have a distinction for deep sleep, which is N3, and for REM periods, which is kind of cool because we talk about like how REM periods get longer at the beginning of the night. Like I noticed just over the past couple of days, okay, well, my first one might be like 7 to 10 minutes, and then I get them up over 30 minutes, depending on the night. And so it is kind of cool to look at those and go, yeah, this is interesting. I can kind of track where this is going. I can see what nights I've had better sleep than other nights. It's kind of fun to play with and just to see how it all works. I don't know all the details behind how their specific algorithm works. I'm definitely interested in how their sleep detection works, but I know they have a lot of sensors built into these things. They're designed for fitness as well and for all sorts of athletic related activities. So it's designed to be able to detect a wide degree of stuff. So I know they have quite a bit of technology built into these applications, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. I've also been experimenting with sleep tracking and stuff. And I found it interesting because I would notice that sometimes I would wake up from a lucid dream and I wasn't necessarily in REM. And I know these things aren't perfect, but I know there's like a lot of new research about lucid dreams being able to happen outside of REM. Although most of my lucid dreams do happen in my longer, later REM periods, like between 6 and 7 a.m. That's when I have like maybe 90% of my lucid dreams. Have you noticed any patterns there with
So,
yours?
so that's pretty par for the course. I'd say I do have most of my lucid dreams within the last couple hours of my sleep. That's pretty normal. Like, for example, I had the last one that I recorded from a couple of nights ago was literally the last, I think the last REM period before I woke up, but somewhere right around that area. And so that's pretty straightforward. I notice most of the ones that I tend to get tend to be later on when I sleep. It is always really fun when you get the early night lucid. It's like, I've only been asleep for how long? What time is it? It's always fun when you get the early night ones, like the first REM
Yeah.
periods or even some of those. And it is kind of interesting to think like I would be willing to bet that possibly slipped in and out of like maybe N2 or N1 and during that one because it kind of felt like it might have like faded in and out at a couple of moments, but I'm not sure if that was actually me changing out of sleep stages or if it was just something in related to how I was expecting things to happen. But because I'm have a pretty deep expectation that that particular dream ended in a false awakening because then I have another dream that basically runs like a false awakening. It's basically like another thing, and I might have all been one whole dream because it was, at least according to my watch, it was a 23-minute REM period, and I guarantee you that that lucid that I had wasn't all 23 minutes of it. So I'm pretty sure that the dream afterwards was basically a false awakening. So if it's saying I didn't
Mm.
actually wake up during that time, then I'm pretty sure that that was probably a false awakening. It's kind of cool to consider all this stuff.
Yeah, that is cool. It does get confusing sometimes because I remember when I was doing this study in the lab at Northwestern, I couldn't tell at one point if I was lucid or if I was just waking up because I thought, like, it was kind of a false awakening. I was like, oh, I'm in a dream. But then I thought, oh, I must have woken up. But then when I woke up actually, and they were like, no, you were still like in REM, I was like, oh, really? Like, I thought I was awake. So it's
It
kind of
is
like
pretty cool.
confusing.
It's
The
cool as
lines
hell
blur.
when that kind of stuff happens. It's pretty funny. My second ever lucid dream was basically like that. I had it was a whole chain of false awakenings, and I didn't really know a bunch about false awakenings at the time. I was just starting to learn. But considering I had just gone through like several dream periods of me being in my room and just like different scenes switching between them, I should have caught on that maybe this isn't what it was after the fact. But I had this lucid. It was really fun kind of thing. And then I quote unquote woke up, walked around the room, was like really elated. I was really excited. I was like, can't wait to share all this with everyone. And then I woke up and was like, oh crap.
That's funny.
Yes. So
Yeah.
so it's always funny when that happens.
Yeah, false awakenings can be very frustrating. I've had them, my whole life pretty much, which I also think is interesting, like that you started lucid dreaming, as an adult and you kind of started, just teaching yourself. My experience is so different. As you know, I've been lucid dreaming since I was like a child. So it kind of came naturally to me. I find it interesting how there's kind of like two types of people. But, I want you to kind of give some hope to people that haven't had a lucid dream in their adult life or they're just kind of starting. Like anybody can learn this, right? Like what was that like for you starting from zero?
Mhm. Well, it was pretty interesting because, like, I wasn't, I didn't know a lot, and like a lot of people who were starting lucid dreaming, I ended up in a space. Let's just say, shall we say, maybe not a specific content source that was known for its veracity. And that's kind of how I started. I started having no clue of what I was doing. And what I was kind of looking to hopefully find was a group of people. I was looking for a community that would, help me sort of understand, kind of learn about it. And I was trying to find people I could learn from. Well, I ended up in an online community, and it was like the Wild West. I didn't know who actually knew what they were talking about. I don't think most of the people there did at the time. But then I found a particular person, Brandon Sensei, you know who you are, who I was immediately able to determine that actually he was one of the only people who was able to answer one of the questions I had. It was actually Dr. LaBerge's book that first got me onto the realization that, hey, a lot of the stuff I'd been hearing wasn't exactly correct. Hey, if someone can't tell me what mild is and they weren't able to answer the question that I had, I was like, I've read Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. This is how Dr. LaBerge, the supposed creator of the technique, well, yes, the creator of the technique describes how to do it. This is how this person is saying how to do it. Okay, who's right? And then people couldn't actually answer the question, and that's how I began to learn who knew something about it and who didn't. That was kind of how I started. Then I found the guy who had been basically lucid dreaming for 8 years, who taught me a lot of stuff, introduced me to his friends, and I basically took off from there. It was almost like an apprenticeship of sorts. I had the ability to benefit from someone else's experience and knowledge, and I think that's a great way to learn just about any skill. Is to find someone who can teach you a skill, who has been doing it for a long time, who's had success, who's experimented with a lot of stuff, who kind of understands a bit about it. Well, not kind of, but like definitely understands a bit about it and can kind of teach you and help you learn and bounce ideas off of each other and all that kind of stuff, like any good mentor should be able to do. And so I kind of learned almost as an apprentice in that sense of the term, where I was learning both from like reading different things that people had written and also just actually talking to a couple of specific people.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's so much information out there, it's important to find people who know what they're talking about. But even with lucid dreaming and dreams, like there's so many different opinions out there, different terminologies for the same type of thing or technique, different perspectives and, even people that know what they're talking about, what works for them might not work for somebody else. So it's really important to kind of just like find your own way and do a lot of research and kind of see what works for each individual person as well. Well, all right. What else should we talk about? Do you have any questions that you want to bring up, or maybe we can kind of wrap up a little bit or share a dream or something?
Well, I was wondering if you've had any interesting lucid dream experience.
I have. Let me pull up my dream journal really quick. I've had like 2 or 3 lucid dreams so far in this month, which is pretty good. They were both kind of basic though. Like I haven't really been doing much with my lucidity lately. So in one of them, like I was at my old school, very common dream sign for me, and like a fight breaks out. And that's another lucidity trigger for me is like scary or stressful situations. So I'm like, oh my God, like these high school kids are like fighting. So I immediately became lucid and I was like, okay, I don't want to deal with that. So I just like flew away and I flew onto the rooftop and I couldn't think of what I wanted to do. So I literally just sat there and took deep breaths and like meditated, which is kind of boring, I guess. But it's kind of, I like to share these things with people because you don't always have to do something like extravagant. Like you can just observe and take in the dream. And it was still very therapeutic. And then in the other one, I was with my brother who is not a lucid dreamer. And I was telling him, like, hey, you're in my dream. Like, look what I can do. I was like changing my outfits and flying around. And he was kind of skeptical, which represents like his attitude about it in waking life. So he was like, I don't know. I don't really believe you. And I was like, no, really, we're in a dream. And I know a lot of people say, like, oh, don't tell people you're dreaming. But for me, it just depends. Like, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Yeah, just going off of that, like I said a couple of nights ago in that lucid dream that I had, I just climbed into this person's plane out of the air and it's like, yeah, it's just my lucid dream, nothing to worry about. I like taking that casual approach with just telling characters that I'm dreaming because, again, it really comes down to a lot of that perception based dream control and sort of the whole taboo that comes up around it and what are the circumstances and expectations that people have and all that kind of stuff. And I've always had a strong association of my dreams as being safe, as being something that nothing's going to hurt me.
Yeah,
And
that
that's
makes a
always
big
I know.
difference. I hate all the fear online that is being spread sometimes. People saying, don't do this in a dream, don't do that. I'm sure you've heard it too. Like it happens a lot. And that just plays a role in what we expect to happen. And even if you have positive expectations and good thoughts, like sometimes dreams react in weird ways, or the dream characters don't react in a way that is favorable. And then that's just part of the dream. Sometimes it has a mind of its own. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun when that happens. I also really do love getting some of those ironic dreams sometimes, like especially ironic in the sense like you really should have realized you were dreaming when you were teaching an entire high school class about lucid dreaming and you're not in high school.
Yeah, exactly. It's always so frustrating when I wake up and I'm like, how did I not know that was a dream? Like, that is the most weird group of people or most random situation ever.
For me, it's
Dreams are
just
so weird.
funny. I just take humor. I just make light of those kind of things. I find it funny. I was like, I just
Yeah.
had all this thing, and dumb me couldn't realize in that moment that I was in a dream. Okay, chalk it up to okay, this is funny. Better luck next time, and go for it again. And yeah, I kind of take that approach with those because some of those situations can be really funny, and
Yeah.
especially when you look back on it, the irony is sometimes pretty hilarious.
Yeah, and I know there's like a neuroscience explanation for why our logical part of our brain is kind of shut down. So we're not able to like pick up on seemingly obvious situations. Anyways, I was also curious, do you write your dreams down or do any techniques or like what's your practice like? Do you just kind of wing it
No,
these days? I know you've been busy with school and all.
my normal practice, I tend to take a pretty mild approach to how I do lucid dreaming. 100% intended. So I do journal my dreams in Microsoft Word on my computer. I do it mostly for record keeping rather than recall because if I think about my dreams and pay attention to them, I can typically remember them pretty well through the day. It does vary from dream to dream and day to day. It really depends. I thought about the lucid dream that I had the whole day. I think I journaled that one midday. So it really depends. Sometimes I journal them in the evening. Sometimes I journal them in the morning. Sometimes I journal them midday. I think that one I journaled midday and ended up writing 507 words. I can tell you exactly when I wrote that because basically a few pages of dream journals. Like that one dream I wrote down was 507 words, and it wasn't even, I think, probably the longest one of the night. It's just the best remember. It really does vary. Sometimes I'll lose them if I don't think about them too much during the day. That's pretty normal. Sometimes I'll journal them earlier. Sometimes I'll journal them later. But I'm not really necessarily doing it for recall, so I'm not advising anyone to do what I do in terms of journaling them. I'm doing it more as a matter of record keeping because I can typically remember them decently, at least for a short time, but I'm journaling them in order to actually be able to go back and review them at some point later if I so choose to, which I will do from time to time. I'll go back and pick one and go look at it and review a certain day. But it kind of varies. I do record them, and then my actual induction practice, mild is my preferred approach, and I really like the way Dr. Kristen Lamarca does it. Her approach, I think, is awesome. I do that whole thing. I go through one of my dreams or multiples of them. I'll rescript them. I'll imagine how they could have been lucid, or if they were lucid, I'll imagine how they could have been better, or maybe what I could have done instead of what I actually did. Sometimes they'll say I don't remember a dream goal, or I wanted to do something and I didn't, or I just didn't take full advantage of the situation. Sometimes I'll rescript a lucid dream and I'll go, okay, I could have done this. And, of course, non-lucid dreams, and I'll go kind of the same way. I could have recognized this specific thing as a dream sign, or this thing that didn't happen. I'll pick out the dream signs. You can make a game out of finding dream signs. It can be pretty interesting sometimes. Just go, okay, well, how many things were out of place in this specific dream? Like, for example, I'll go through one of the dreams I had last night, like the one that was better remembered. For some reason, I'm booking an Amtrak ticket that goes directly from Chicago to my home city, which is impossible to do because there are no routes that take that. Dream sign number one. The train number was changing between 75 and 28, and it's not consistent. Dream sign number two. I'm trying to book an upgrade while both on the train and not on the train at the same time. Dream sign number three. While also trying to book an Amtrak upgrade through the Uber app. Dream sign number four. And also finding booking into someone else's roomette where there's already 4 people booked into a room that could barely hold 2. Dream sign number 5. I think you get the idea. So I can kind of pick these out and go, okay, how could I have realized that this is a dream? Okay, well, let me think about this. Well, let's say I'm in the Uber app and I'm going, okay, well, the train number changed from 75 to 28, and I'm trying to book an Amtrak upgrade through an Uber app, and it's supposedly only going to cost me $50 for something that normally costs $1,000. Okay, I'd say that's a huge dream sign. I should definitely recognize, hey, this is a dream wherever I am standing in that moment. Okay, I'm actually dreaming right now. Okay, what is it that I want to do? Well, let's say I want to go to Nihon desu. Okay, I want to go to Japan, and I'll get there by app rating. And so I just spin around, and I'm standing, let's just say some arbitrary place in Tokyo, just randomly, doesn't matter. Okay, and then I start walking around, find something I want to do, and then just sort of repeat that whole kind of thing. So that's how my typical mile practice goes. And it's kind of fun. Sometimes the dreams can be really interesting to pick things out of and get things from.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I love that dream. I was looking through my dream journal as well, and I actually want to share one too that kind of goes off of some things you were talking about. And it's actually a dream that you were in. So I searched up in my dream journal and I found it. So this was a couple weeks ago. So I was in a cabin with some friends, including you, Skyfall. You were there, and some lucid dreaming friends. We were making a pizza, and then some kidnappers or the villain characters comes knocking on the door. They're complaining and they're mad at us because we posted something with local hashtags and we were supposed to go live, but we didn't go live. And then they're mad at us. And so we're nervous, and they have guns, and they come up to the door, and I'm telling everybody, go hide, go to the bedroom. I'll take care of it. I'm trying to call 911 and my phone is glitching. I can't call 911. It's not working. And then I get to the backyard and I realize it's a dream. And I'm kind of semi in and out of lucidity. It's one of those weird in-betweens where I realize it's a dream, but I'm still worried about the scenario, and I go in and out, and then I just fly away and I wake up. Uneventful, but kind of brings together a lot of the things we talked about today. So good to see you in the dream world.
That is pretty fun. I've dreamt about you that much, but it is kind of cool to hear that other people were dreaming about each other. I'm trying to think if I've dreamed about anyone that I talked to a lot online. Not anything recently, but it sounded like you got lucid. That sounded almost like a lucid nightmare in the sense that you had a little bit of a nightmare, maybe not a full-on nightmare, but a stress dream or something like that you got lucid in. The analytical part of me is going I can tell you why your phone was glitching. That's the analytical part of me. Digging around and going it was glitching because you were afraid of the situations you're in, or nervous or scared about the situations you're in, or something along those lines. And you're trying to do this thing. You're trying to call the police. And then it's it's not going to work.
Yeah,
and
it's fumbling.
Yeah, I can break that and go okay, I can probably tell you why that did. But the way it did.
That makes sense, yeah.
That's the analytical side of me going let's see.
I was shaky and nervous. So the phone being a representation of a part of me was also shaky and nervous.
Well, also,
yeah.
Also, on the other side of that is you have it, you're trying to do a thing and you're like worrying that something isn't going to work the way it is. And the combination of that and the emotional state and all that just makes it not work the way it's supposed to. I'm
Yeah,
terrified of that too.
that's interesting.
It's
Yeah,
because
that's
if you juxtapose that on a dream where everything's happy and going fine, and things tend to be like work the way they should, and then things get like really crazy, all of a sudden you get things like glitching and things being weird, and all of a sudden you're stuck somewhere or something's not working the way it's like. I've had kind of dreams like that before where I was trying to use something in a situation and it wasn't working too well.
yeah,
That's
it's
kind of
pretty
that's kind of
common.
how I look at some of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's so many different factors contributing to dreams and things, and we're taking in sensations from the outside world even when we're asleep, so even without realizing it. So I think it's cool, and I'm excited to see how science continues to learn more about the function of dreams and what makes up dream content. I think we only have a small picture of the whole small part of the picture. So yeah, I'm excited for that. Are you going to be going to the online conference this year at all?
Well, I don't know because half of what I like to do at these
Yeah.
conferences, I can't do. What I like to do is go network and talk to
Mhm.
people in the hospitality suite for like 3 hours
Yeah,
and
same.
meet people and bounce ideas off of people and network. That's what I like doing at these kind of things. And I
Yeah,
can't do any of that.
I know. I feel like presentations are cool, but I can just Google what people do and watch YouTube
And
videos.
it's the question and answer that is the fun part of the presentations too, like question, answer, and hearing the research. But then after the presentation, going finding the researcher if they're one of those kind of people who are open, and then talking to them about their ideas for 4 hours straight, sitting somewhere before you even know who the person is, just talking to them for a long time is fun. I will never forget some of those experiences I had with people like Elliot Gish, who's really amazing, who I talked to for 4 hours that first day, or where I met Kristen Lamarca, for example. I talked to her in the hospitality suite that one day. I met Dash there, talked to her several times. Actually, the whole reason I got involved, like getting on the Tech for Dreaming group in the first place, is because I ran into several of those people there. That was the whole reason I got involved in that,
Yeah.
is I met Dash there. And if I hadn't met Dash there, I wouldn't have really gotten into meeting some of those other people. And it was really cool. I feel like the best part of some of these types of conferences, oh yeah, meeting Stephen LaBerge was also really cool. That was definitely a highlight for me. But the best
Wow.
part about any of these conferences is the people you meet, the networking opportunities, the chance to exchange ideas and information, to get a chance to kind of know people a little bit. The interpersonal aspect is completely lost when you make something online. And it's what a lot of people have learned because of COVID, is education became so impersonal. Kind of had a lot of people looking about what did COVID do to the people who were forced to take online classes for a year. They were denied the ability to engage in those kind of social experiences that a lot of people do. And so the kind of that networking, that's why I've always preferred in school, in-person education to online. Like I've never really enjoyed doing online type of courses because you don't have that element of being able to interact with people. You can't go to your professor's office and talk to them for 30 minutes if you have a problem, or just catch up, or there's so many things you just can't do in an online space, which is sad.
Yeah, you're so right. And I still encourage people to go to the online, if you want to get involved, but there'll be many more in-person conferences after that. So we'll still make it work.
By the way, are they still doing regional conferences, or are they not doing those?
Yeah, they do regional conferences. I don't know about the East Coast, or I haven't heard of any specifically. Maybe the West Coast is better at doing regionals, but I'm on the list for regionals. I haven't heard
I
any
would
a
be
specific
very
date.
interested in hearing if there are any regionals that, like, especially if there are any regionals that I could possibly attend. I think that would be a lot of fun.
That's
Yeah.
true. I'm in contact with one of the regional managers or people, so maybe I'll ask her and
Yeah,
I'll
that,
let you
that
know.
would be kind of cool to know if I'm thinking about what I might do this summer or fall, maybe even. I don't know when they host some of these, actually.
Yeah, maybe we can host one. That's probably what they're gonna say. They're gonna be like, "Well, host one, and I need
All right.
money.
I
Are
need
you
I need money
funding
too. Yeah, you get us.
it?"
Let's do like a DC regional conference. How about that? Let's do like a DC. We'll combine the
I would
Southeast
go.
and the Northeast, and we'll all just meet in DC.
That would be perfect, actually. They should do that.
Oh, what a big coincidence that I'm just planning on trying to move up there this year.
How
As
convenient.
it has nothing to do with that suggestion. It would be cool, like all jokes aside, it would be cool if there was like a regional one to go to somewhere. That would be kind of fun.
Okay, yeah. Well, I will research that and I will let you know what I discover. Okay, well, Skyfall, thanks for chatting. This has been fun. Do you have any closing words of advice for lucid dream enthusiasts out there?
One thing that comes to mind a lot for me is to don't assume that just because you're not getting the results you want at a specific moment, that you're specifically doing something wrong. Because it's a very easy trap to fall into. I'm not doing something correctly. You could perform a practice, do everything correctly, and still not get lucid. And I would even say count it as being successful, maybe not getting lucid, but at least in doing the practice that you're doing, keeping with your routine. Just because you don't get lucid on a particular night, or just because some technique you're trying doesn't work for you on a particular day, or even if that technique just doesn't work for you, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing it wrong. Now it could be that, maybe you're doing something wrong, but it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you don't get lucid that you're doing something wrong. So I think that's an easy trap for people to fall into. Of course, the other one is expecting all of your lucid dreams to be short if that's how they start when you begin. So those are two of the big beginner traps I would just warn a lot of people against.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, for sure. It takes some time sometimes. I tell people not to get frustrated and just fall in love with all your dreams, not just the lucid ones. Open up a general relationship with your dreams and give it some time. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Awesome. Well, Skyfall, thanks for chatting with me. I think that wraps up our episode today. Hopefully it inspires some people and gets the conversation going. And once I get this edited, I will send it over to you.
Thank you very much.